Are we programmed machines, controlled by electrons we can change, living a life predetermined by the brain we were born with? Or are we able to reconnect and reprogram the mind and control our own future? At the beginning of neuroscience, the principle that all neurons in the brain originate before birth and therefore it is impossible to repair a damaged brain was generally accepted. For years, neuroscientists have assumed that the structure of the adult human brain is immutable. In other words, we were referred to only as what we have. But after some time, that attitude began to change. New experimental research has shown just the opposite. There has been evidence that the brain could actually be plastic. It can adapt, grow, and even regenerate. Subsequent experiments have shown that the brain retains the ability to change on a large scale in structure and function. One of the most important changes is neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons from neuronal stem cells in an adult. It offers tremendous potential for our ability to heal. Therefore, treatment methods such as cognitive behavior therapy or CBT, a form of speech therapy, can help us deal with our own problems by changing the way we think and behave. Encouraging neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to constantly change, could help people in essential ways. When we are taught to think differently about our life experiences during this type of psychological intervention, it can actually affect both the structure and the function of the brain. But be aware of neurohype, believing we can change everything about our brains. What happens when someone fails to overcome depression or trauma by thinking? Are we going to accuse them of not thinking the right thoughts? The idea that everything that went wrong in the brain can be fixed is definitely a step too far. Biological determinism can seriously categorize and severely limit individuals. For example, we could attribute many aspects of behavior to gender stereotypes. Some people do believe that your sex chromosomes affect how you behave. Women are irrational and men are unemotional. It won't be. The brains of men and women are different and that these differences are immutable, and discovered that there is nothing in human biology that would justify the idea that there are gender differences in the brain. People are driven to develop a male brain or a female brain because of all the experiences they have accumulated over a lifetime that have told them that their abilities and behavior are determined by gender. The brain is a much more active actor in the world than we have ever been aware of, and therefore the world and what exists in the world have a much greater impact than we thought. The adaptability of the brain works in both directions, and the same idea of plasticity, which we now know lasts from the birth to old age, could help us escape the outdated and the gender prejudices and limitations they impose. When faced with parenting decisions, it can be quite comforting to think that life is, to some extent, immutable. Inherited, unlike acquired, could help a parent cope with the pressures of life in a time of decision making and endless parental anxiety. So, if acquisition is so important, should parents be more concerned about how they raise their children? Plasticity of the brain could also be a source of optimism for parents. Plasticity means a more carefree and positive attitude toward human potential, a world in which children's brains are more empty, unburdened by genetic inheritance. Our brains change every day. Every time you learn something new or think a new thought, you create and consolidate a new neural connections in your brain, building a new physical structure in it. But how much can we expect to change? Most important changes are happening at the micro level. These are small changes in the level of synaptic connections between individual neurons. That's where our memories are formed. For example, it might not be a bad idea to constantly remind us that brain plasticity is not unlimited, and to be more skeptical of the idea that at the micro level we can experience transformations that can change our personality. We should weigh the evidence a little more carefully and be distrustful of the idea that we can change anything we want. Be free to break all the shackles of our own genetics and turn ourselves into the person we want to be. We are constantly using our brains. We use the auditory and visual parts of the brains all the time, and yet they aren't constantly getting bigger. Also, what research shows is that the degree to which our brains are plastic is, ironically, determined by our genes. When everything is added and subtracted, the influence of our genes and our environment, what we were born with, and plasticity are extremely intertwined. We need to move away from the dichotomy of inherited versus acquired, because the two are inextricably linked. We come into the world with some preconceived connections, innate predispositions that depend on our biology and the way our brains have developed, and that determines some aspects of our personality. The multitude of our individual decisions that make up our unique lives can, in some cases, be inscribed in our genes, but these predetermined connections don't explain everything about our decision-making process, most of which is acquired. The habits we acquire in response to our experiences are things that control our actions. There is a constant interplay between the influence of genetics and the influence of our experiences on our brains. Both persistently shape our personality throughout our lives. It is not our destiny, but free will and the power of genetics that determine our future.